The Thompsons' award-winning garden was the pride of their neighborhood, until the HOA president's toxic jealousy tore it all down. Now, the war over a patch of flowers has sparked an explosive feud that threatens to rip this community apart. Kara Thompson gazed at the riot of color in her garden, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. After years of painstaking work, her little plot of land had been crowned the best in the state, a prestigious award that made the endless hours of pruning and weeding more than worth it. But as she turned to head back inside, the smile vanished. Striding up the driveway was none other than Meredith Wilkins, the HOA president and Kara's longtime adversary. Meredith's brow was furrowed, her lips pursed in a disapproving scowl. "Kara," she snapped, not even bothering with a greeting. "We need to talk." Kara steeled herself, bracing for the latest salvo in their ongoing battle. "What is it now, Meredith?" "That monstrosity you call a garden." Meredith spat, gesturing wildly. "It's a safety hazard, an eyesore, and it has to go." Kara's jaw dropped. Safety hazard, eyesore. This garden won a state award. "I don't care what some ridiculous contest says," Meredith retorted. "It's overgrown, it blocks the sidewalk, and it's a liability waiting to happen. You have 2 weeks to tear it all out, or we'll do it for you and bill you for the cost." Kara felt her blood boiling. "You can't be serious. This garden is my life's work." "Then I suggest you get to work," Meredith sneered. "Because if it's not gone in 2 weeks, we'll make sure it disappears for good." With that, she turned on her heel and stalked off, leaving Kara trembling with fury. After all these years of Meredith's petty harassment, this was the final straw. Kara was going to fight back, and she was going to win. The next day, Kara marched into the HOA office, her expression grim. Meredith looked up from her desk, a smug smile spreading across her face. "Kara, how nice of you to stop by," she purred. "Have you given any thought to my suggestion?" "Suggestion?" Kara spat. "You threatened to destroy my garden. That's not a suggestion. It's an ultimatum." Meredith's smile widened. "I'm so glad you understand. Now, I expect to see progress on that eyesore within the next 2 weeks. Or what?" Kara interrupted, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You'll send your little goons to tear it all down." Meredith leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "If that's what it takes to maintain the integrity of our neighborhood, then yes. I'm afraid I have no choice." Kara felt her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "You know this garden isn't just some eyesore, Meredith. It's my life's work, my passion, and you're trying to destroy it out of pure spite." Meredith's eyes narrowed. "Spite? Please, Kara, don't flatter yourself. This is about upholding our community standards, nothing more. If your precious garden doesn't fit within those standards, then it has to go." "Community standards?" Kara scoffed. "Since when does community standards mean destroying an award-winning?" "Since I became president," Meredith cut in, her voice sharp. "And as long as I'm in charge, my word is law. So I suggest you start packing up those plants, Kara, before we have to do it for you." Kara opened her mouth to retort, but Meredith raised a hand, silencing her. 2 weeks, Kara. That's your deadline." With that, she turned her attention back to the papers on her desk, effectively dismissing Kara. Fuming, Kara stormed out of the office, her mind racing. She couldn't let Meredith win this battle, not after all the work she'd put into her beloved garden. But as she walked home, a seed of doubt began to take root. What if Meredith was serious about tearing it all down? Over the next few days, Kara poured her heart and soul into her garden, working tirelessly to prune, weed, and tend to every inch of it. She knew Meredith's threat was no idle one, and she was determined to prove once and for all that her garden was not just beautiful, but an integral part of the community. As she labored, her husband, Michael, watched with a growing sense of unease. "Kara, are you sure this is the best use of your time?" he asked gently. I mean, Meredith is the HOA president. She has a lot of power, and she seems pretty determined to get rid of the garden. Kara paused, wiping the sweat from her brow. I know, Michael, but this garden means everything to me. I can't just let Meredith bulldoze it without a fight. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. I understand, but I'm worried about what might happen. She could try to have us fined, or even take legal action. Is it really worth the risk? Kara's eyes narrowed. Of course it is. This garden is my life's work, and I'm not going to let some power-hungry HOA president destroy it. We've put up with Meredith's nonsense for years, and I'm done backing down. Michael opened his mouth to protest, but Kara held up a hand, silencing him. I've made up my mind, Michael. I'm going to do whatever it takes to protect this garden, even if it means going to war with the HOA. As the days ticked by, Kara's determination only grew stronger. She reached out to her neighbors, pleading with them to write letters to the HOA in support of her garden. But to her dismay, many of them were too afraid of Meredith's wrath to get involved. Frustrated, Kara turned to the local media, hoping to drum up public support for her cause. But Meredith was one step ahead, using her influence to keep the story from gaining traction. With time running out and the threat of her beloved garden's destruction looming, Kara knew she had to take drastic action. She couldn't let Meredith win, not this time. As the 2-week deadline approached, Kara's nerves were frayed. She'd tried every tactic she could think of, but Meredith remained unmoved, her resolve as unbreakable as Kara's own. One evening, as Kara was tending to her garden, she heard a commotion coming from the street. Rushing to the front of the house, she found her neighbor, Mrs. Hendricks, in a heated argument with a group of men in orange vests. What's going on here? Kara demanded, her heart pounding. Mrs. Hendricks turned to her, her face flushed with anger. These men say they're here to remove your garden, Kara. Meredith sent them. Kara's blood ran cold. What? No, this can't be happening. The men in the vests stepped forward, brandishing clipboards. Ma'am, we have a work order from the HOA to remove this garden. It's a safety hazard, and it needs to go. Kara shook her head frantically. No, you can't do this. I won't let you. But the men ignored her protests, already beginning to gather their tools. Mrs. Hendricks tried in vain to block their path, but they pushed past her, undeterred. Kara watched in horror as the men started to dig up her beloved plants, tearing them from the ground with callous disregard. Tears streamed down her face as she frantically tried to stop them, but they brushed her aside, their faces set in grim determination. As the destruction unfolded, a crowd of neighbors began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Some watched in silence, while others shouted angrily at the men, demanding they stop. Suddenly, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. Meredith, a smug smile on her face. What's the matter, Kara? She taunted. I told you this garden had to go. Kara whirled on her, her eyes burning with fury. You did this. You had no right. Meredith shrugged nonchalantly. I'm the HOA president, Kara. I have every right. And now, your precious garden is gone. Kara opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. As she watched the men continue to methodically dismantle her life's work, a sinking feeling of defeat washed over her. Meredith had won. In the aftermath of the garden's destruction, Kara was devastated. She spent days in a haze of grief, unable to bring herself to go outside and face the empty, barren space that had once been her pride and joy. Michael tried his best to console her, but even he couldn't understand the depth of her anguish. I know it hurts, honey, he said gently, but we can start over. We can build something new, something even better. Kara shook her head, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. It's not the same, Michael. That garden was my life's work. I poured my heart and soul into it, and now it's gone. All because of that witch, Meredith. Michael sighed, wrapping his arms around her. I know, Kara, but we can't let her win. We have to fight back. Kara pulled away, her expression hardening. Fight back? How? Meredith has the entire HOA wrapped around her finger. She's untouchable. Then we'll take it to the next level, Michael said, his voice filled with determination. We'll go public with this, expose Meredith's abuse of power. The media will eat it up, and the community will be outraged. Kara hesitated, considering his words. You really think that will work? Michael nodded. It has to. We can't let Meredith get away with this, Kara. This isn't just about your garden anymore. It's about standing up to corruption and protecting our community. Kara felt a spark of hope ignite within her. Okay, she said, her voice steady. Let's do it. Over the next few days, Kara and Michael worked tirelessly, reaching out to local news outlets and sharing their story. They gathered statements from neighbors who had witnessed Meredith's heavy-handed tactics and compiled a dossier of evidence detailing her abuse of power. Finally, they held a press conference, with Kara standing before the cameras, her face a mask of determination. Meredith Wilkins and the HOA have gone too far, she declared. They've destroyed my garden, my life's work, all because of one woman's petty jealousy and thirst for power. But we won't let them get away with it. We're going to fight back, and we're going to win. The fallout was immediate and explosive. Meredith's actions were condemned by the community, and the local authorities launched an investigation into the HOA's practices. Kara and Michael had finally found a way to challenge Meredith's iron grip on the neighborhood. But the battle was far from over. As the media firestorm surrounding the garden's destruction intensified, Meredith found herself increasingly on the defensive. The once untouchable HOA president was now the target of a growing public outcry, with neighbors lining up to share their own stories of her abusive tactics. Kara and Michael, emboldened by their initial success, continued to push the issue, appearing on talk shows and giving interviews that painted a damning picture of Meredith's reign. This isn't just about my garden, Kara told one interviewer, her eyes blazing with conviction. It's about standing up to bullies and corruption in our community. Meredith Wilkins has used the HOA as her own personal fiefdom for far too long, and we're not going to let her get away with it anymore. Meredith, meanwhile, hunkered down in her office, her usual confidence shaken. She had never anticipated the level of backlash she was facing, and the prospect of losing her position as HOA president was a bitter pill to swallow. This is all just a smear campaign, she told her closest allies, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. Kara and her husband are making a mountain out of a molehill, and the media is eating it up. We have to shut this down before it gets any further out of hand. But as the investigation into the HOA's practices continued, it became clear that Meredith's grip on power was slipping. Neighbors who had once been too afraid to speak out were now coming forward, sharing stories of fines, threats, and retaliation at the hands of the HOA. Kara and Michael, sensing their momentum, redoubled their efforts, organizing community meetings and rallying support for their cause. They knew that if they could just keep the pressure on, Meredith would have no choice but to resign or face the consequences of her actions. As the weeks passed, the tension in the neighborhood reached a fever pitch. Neighbors took sides, with some still loyal to Meredith and others firmly in Kara's camp. The air was thick with hostility, and the threat of violence hung heavy over the community. Kara, her nerves frayed, but her determination unwavering, knew that the final showdown was looming. She had come too far to back down now, and she wasn't about to let Meredith win. The day of the crucial HOA meeting arrived, and the community center was packed to the brim. Kara and Michael sat in the front row, their faces set in grim determination as they waited for the proceedings to begin. When Meredith finally took the stage, the room erupted in a chorus of boos and jeers. She flinched, her usual composure cracking, but she pressed on, her voice trembling as she tried to regain control of the meeting. Quiet, all of you, she shouted, banging her gavel against the podium. "This meeting will come to order, or I'll have you all removed." But the crowd refused to be silenced, their anger fueling a crescendo of shouts and insults. Kara felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing that Meredith was finally being held accountable for her actions. Finally, one of Meredith's allies, a burly man named Frank, stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough," he bellowed, his voice cutting through the din. "This meeting will proceed according to protocol, or we'll have no choice but to adjourn." A hush fell over the room, and Meredith seized the opportunity, launching into a defensive tirade about the HOA's necessary actions to maintain community standards. But as she spoke, Kara could see the cracks in her facade, the way her eyes darted nervously around the room. When the time came for public comments, Kara rose to her feet, her heart pounding. "I'm here today to demand the resignation of Meredith Wilkins as HOA president," she declared, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "Her actions have been nothing short of abusive, and she has shown a complete disregard for the well-being of this community." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, and Meredith's face flushed with fury. She opened her mouth to respond, but Kara pressed on, her voice growing stronger. "Meredith Wilkins has used her position of power to bully and intimidate her neighbors, to destroy property, and to silence anyone who dares to challenge her. But we're not going to let her get away with it anymore. We demand accountability, and we demand change." As Kara's words echoed through the room, Meredith's allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions betraying their unease. Kara knew that she had them on the ropes, and she was determined to land the final blow. The tension in the room was palpable as Kara stood before the assembled crowd, her gaze unwavering as she locked eyes with Meredith. "For too long, we've all lived in fear of Meredith and her HOA cronies," she continued, her voice ringing with conviction. "But no more. Today, we stand united, and we say enough is enough." Meredith's face contorted with fury, her knuckles white as she gripped the podium. "This is outrageous," she spat. "I've served this community for years, and this is how you repay me." But the crowd refused to be swayed, their jeers and boos drowning out her protests. Kara seized the moment, pressing her advantage. "Meredith, your reign of terror is over," she declared. "If you don't resign immediately, we'll take this fight to the courts, and we'll make sure that you and the entire HOA are held accountable for your actions." The room erupted into thunderous applause, and Meredith's allies shifted uncomfortably, their resolve crumbling. Kara could see the panic in Meredith's eyes, and she knew that the moment of reckoning had arrived. Suddenly, Meredith raised her hand, silencing the crowd. "Very well," she said, her voice strained. "I resign, effective immediately." A stunned silence fell over the room, and Kara felt a surge of triumph. They had won. Meredith Wilkins, the once untouchable HOA president, had been brought down by the power of the community. As Meredith stormed out of the room, Kara turned to Michael, her eyes shining with tears of relief and joy. "We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We really did it." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, and Kara felt a sense of vindication wash over her. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, justice had prevailed. Meredith's reign of terror was over, and the community was free to chart a new course, one built on mutual respect and understanding. As Kara and Michael embraced, surrounded by their grateful neighbors, they knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for a better, fairer community was far from over, but they were ready to take it on, one battle at a time.